Copy all.
Comms from the core to CREW-11 as they're donning their suits. Now, before the controllers give Dragon permission to move inside that approach ellipsoid, the spacecraft will be on what is known as a 24-hour safe trajectory. This means that if Dragon were to lose all control to its thrusters, it would be at least 24 hours before its trajectory would move inside of that approach ellipsoid.
And once Dragon arrives at the 400-meter mark below the station, it will be known as what is Waypoint 0, and that will be the first checkpoint during their approach to the International Space Station. The vehicle can hold here at the 400-meter mark, but if all of its systems check out, and we'll hear calls about it a little bit later on, Dragon can continue its approach to Waypoint 1. Dragon's move from Waypoint 0 to Waypoint 1 will swing it up and over top of the station as they'll be docking to the zenith port of the Harmony module today of the International Space Station, and it'll be arriving at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which is essentially meaning it's directly in front of the space-facing docking port, and again, on the International Space Station's Harmony module. Just before arriving at Waypoint 0, the NASA and SpaceX teams will conduct a go, no-go poll for Dragon to move inside the now keep-out sphere, another checkpoint that consists of an imaginary sphere around the station with a radius of 200 meters. Flight controllers use this to monitor all arriving and departing vehicles, and this is another chance to confirm all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving even closer to the station. It carries a similar requirement on this orbital trajectory that if Dragon were to somehow lose control of its thrusters, and the space station would be safe for 4 orbits, or about 6 hours, rather than the 24 hours required to enter the approach ellipsoid.
Then once Dragon has approval to move inside the keep-out sphere, it will move from Waypoint 1 in toward Waypoint 2, which is just 20 meters away from the station. Once Dragon is only 20 meters away at Waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter, or the IDA. We may also hear the call-out CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands Off Point. Now, this happens a little less than 30 seconds before docking when Dragon is just a few meters from the docking port. And then at that point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon. And the grand arrival, when our crew arrives at the space station, Dragon will fly in and make contact with the IDA, giving us what we call a soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and then firmly secure Dragon to its new home on the space station.
Now, once the hard capture is confirmed, the station crew aboard the International Space Station, namely NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, will manually start to begin the docking procedures and manually pressurize the vestibule, or the area between the Dragon hatch and the International Space Station hatch. Meanwhile, umbilicals that provide power, audio, and data connections from the station to Dragon are then put in place. And then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which are currently timelined to come a little more than 2 hours following the docking. So right now we're continuing to track along, and we heard comms earlier between the ground and the crew. They're getting suited up to provide that extra layer of protection for them and pressurize those suits as we're entering another round of dynamic ops. It's been a busy day for CREW-11 after launch earlier this morning. So that approach initiation burn coming up in about 8 minutes or so. So we'll see and hear more communications as those crew members continue to get dressed up.
Yeah, CREW-11 is currently coasting. They've got a couple more hours on their flight from launch this morning. And we did attempt a launch yesterday morning, but due to weather, had to move the launch this morning, but they're still docking around a similar time, which is great for them. They have a little bit of a shorter trip, or I guess they could have had a longer trip on Dragon, which may have been a pro for them either way.
And if they did launch yesterday, it would have been about a 39-hour phasing period
Right.
versus the 16 hours that you mentioned there. But even then, I feel like they might be a little anxious and excited to get there, because even at this moment, with the approach initiation burn and the anticipated docking time, which right now tracking around the 2:26 a.m. Eastern time, approximately 11:26 p.m. Pacific, that's still about 30-ish minutes, half an hour or so early. So you know that these CREW-11 members, with Commander Zena Cardman, pilot Mike Fink, both of NASA, and then you also have Kimi Yue of JAXA and Oleg Platonov of Roscosmos, again, getting suited up, getting ready for that approach initiation burn. But you heard it in their comms after the launch today, in those special words, a lot of emotion, a lot of excitement, I'd imagine, knowing that, you know, at the end of a trip, when you're hitting your destination, that excitement continues to ramp up.
Yeah, and I'm sure Zena is very excited. She's been ready since last year, so I'm really excited to see her finally flying her mission. And there you can see the map, and you can see the destination for CREW-11. That's the International Space Station. That is where CREW-11 is heading to.
And right now, the International Space Station making its way across the Pacific Ocean, and it's heading towards a southern southeast trajectory. So it's going to start to clip that southern portion of South America there. But yeah, as they continue that slow and to the crew. Of course, they'll do similar checks, leak checks, pressurization checks that we heard at launch time. They'll initiate all those procedures as they get ready for that approach initiation burn, again, coming up here in the next couple of minutes. But you mentioned the suits themselves. One thing that we talked about during the launch earlier this morning was that one of the astronauts, Colonel Mike Fink of NASA, is wearing one of the new IVA suits. Now, when you look at the crew all lined up, the four of them across, you can't really tell the difference is everything seems, at least visually, the exact same, but I'm sure it'll be exciting for Fink to don that suit again, and I'd be curious to get his reaction knowing what his other crewmates are wearing as well.
Yeah, that's what I love about SpaceX, is that the crew really helps create the suits here, and you can see this animation on the screen. Now, the IVA suits have a 3D printed helmet. They're still very similar to each other, but there's been some upgrades. They do have a little bit more mobility on the new IVA suits. They've taken a lot from the extravehicular suits and have a little bit more mobility there. One of the top updates for this suit is that the suit is a two-piece suit. So you can see on the waist where it looks like there's almost a seam there. On the new suit, that's where the zipper is, where they can separate the top part of the suit from the bottom part of the suit. Makes it a little bit easier to get into the suit. Now, the old IVA suit is one piece. They do have one zipper where they're going through and putting on the whole suit. So the new updates, again, feedback from the astronauts, the crew that has been flying with SpaceX, has been able to give this feedback and allow us to make these updates that make it a lot easier and make a lot of improvements that are coming from the people that are using the suits.
So as we get updates in the crew in their suits now, we just got note that the approach initiation burn is underway, and that's one of the big key milestones now for the Dragon spacecraft to continue its methodical approach to the International Space Station. So certainly some good news there, as everything continuing to move forward as Dragon continues that stair step to catch up to the orbiting laboratory.
As we continue in towards docking, let's take a closer look at the Dragon spacecraft that is bringing CREW-11 to the International Space Station today. The Dragon spacecraft and its trunk stands over 27 feet tall. There are two windows on the spacecraft. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the International Space Station to the IDA. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight, and the trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo, so there's a lot of space on the spacecraft.
And Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. Now, that doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
Yeah, Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the space station. And there are currently 5 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions that have docked to the International Space Station already. Endeavor, Resilience, Endurance, Freedom, and Grace, which you could see there on your screen. Today's crew is flying aboard Dragon Endeavor. This is the first operational Dragon to carry crew on board during SpaceX and NASA's Demo 2 mission in 2020. Endeavor has been very busy since then, having also flown NASA's Crew-2, Crew-6, and Crew-8 missions, as well as the Axiom 1 mission. And in fact, this is the first Dragon spacecraft to fly for a 6th time.
And with that, it's the 6th time they have completed the approach initiation burn, which just got wrapped up just a few moments ago. And now Dragon tracking to be a little bit more than 7 kilometers away from the International Space Station and moving about 4.8 meters per second. So it was a good burn and everything moving quite along and swimmingly for the NASA SpaceX Crew-11 team. Now, overall, this is Dragon's 49th visit to the space station and its 19th human spaceflight mission to the orbiting laboratory. Including Crew-11 on board right now, SpaceX has now flown 74 crew members to the space station since the Demo 2 mission in May of 2020. And actually hearing from the SpaceX team earlier today that this is actually the anniversary of the splashdown of Demo 2 and the return of astronauts from American soil. So Endeavor, which was that spacecraft for Bob and Doug, now docking the International Space Station on that 5-year anniversary. And for nearly 25 years, crew aboard the space station have completed thousands of scientific and educational experiments, and Crew-11 is prepared to add to that growing number. Crew-11 will conduct hundreds of science and experience and technology demonstrations during their mission, in which they will spend multiple months working aboard the orbital laboratory. Having more crew members on board significantly expands the amount of research that can be conducted, and this crew will conduct their new scientific research to prepare for human exploration beyond low Earth orbit and benefit humanity on Earth. And some of those will be directly intertwined with the Artemis campaign that'll send astronauts back to the moon and beyond. So it'll be fun to see what they're able to participate in during their long-duration stay.
Yeah, always very exciting to see what these crews can do. Some of the more than 200 research and tech demonstrations Crew-11 will participate in include a set to study plant cell division and microgravity's effects on bacteria-killing viruses, as well as perform experiments to produce a higher volume of human stem cells and generate on-demand nutrients. Overall, the hundreds of research and tech demonstrations the crew will work with throughout their mission span a wide range of disciplines, from life and physical sciences to advanced materials, technology development, in-space production applications, and even some student-led research. And not only will all this research provide valuable insights for future deep space missions of exploration and help establish a market in low Earth orbit, it will also directly benefit humanity here on Earth. When astronauts engage with students worldwide via the ISS ham radio program, researchers will use the ham radio hardware to test software for navigation and communication test bed, or NAVCOM, that could help shape future lunar navigation, which is a personal favorite of Mike Fink.
And that was something that he talked about a lot during the media breakout sessions that we had with him. Is for him, during his last mission, which was 14 years ago, it was an opportunity to communicate with not only people in North America and in the United States, but he had a chance to communicate with people all across the world and took a lot of pride in that he got to speak with everyone on each and every individual continent. So I know that's probably an experiment and technology that he's really excited to dive back in. Expedition 73 is also scheduled to conduct a Bionutrients 3 investigation, and that's producing essential nutrients on demand in space using engineering microbes like yogurt and yeast and helping offset nutrient loss during long-duration missions. The study also tests food safety, including pasteurization, while exploring sustainable techniques for deep space travel. And that really ties into the Artemis campaign. As we do missions further and further out, you're going to need to have those opportunities to preserve your food and be able to produce food when you're a little further away from home. Now, there are currently 7 astronauts and cosmonauts living aboard the International Space Station as a part of Expedition 73, as we continue to follow along and track the path of Crew-11 here this evening. Following Crew-11's arrival today, the space station will have a total of 11 crew members, fitting Crew-11, 11 crew members aboard for just a few days. Part of those 11 crew members include the Crew-10 cadre of NASA astronauts, including Anne McClain. Nicole Ayres, who we mentioned earlier, will be part of the hatch opening procedures. JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
Yeah, the Crew-10 astronauts will bring the new arrivals up to speed on everything happening aboard the space station, from emergency procedures to ongoing research. When NASA and SpaceX teams determine weather is ideal for splashdown, the members of Crew-10 will board their Dragon, named Endurance, and return back down to Earth.
Now, direct handovers between crew allow for the continuity of these activities and help to ensure a continuous U.S. presence on the International Space Station, and that's been that for nearly a quarter of a decade. And celebrating the 25th anniversary of continuous human presence in November, I know that was something that program manager for the International Space Station, Dana Weigel, incredibly proud of, talked about it after the post-launch today and in a lot of the media breakout sessions, and a lot to look forward to. This will be the crew on board when that anniversary comes around. And in the fall, NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Kutsverchkov, as well as Sergei Mikhaev, will join the crew on orbit. And shortly after that, we'll have the departure of the Soyuz MS-27, and that's what we were talking about earlier with NASA astronaut Johnny Kim coming home, and that will mark the commencement of Expedition 74. Now, as we continue to follow along with Dragon's procedures to the International Space Station, now 5.6 kilometers away and closing in at a rate about 4.6 meters per second. While we wait for our next milestone, let's take a moment to meet our crew. NASA astronaut Xena Cardman is your CREW-11 commander. Selected as a NASA astronaut in 2017, CREW-11 is her first spaceflight. The Williamsburg, Virginia native holds a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in marine sciences from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. At the time of her astronaut selection, she was pursuing a doctorate in geosciences, and Cardman's geobiology and geochemical cycling research focused on subsurface environments from caves to deep sea sediments. Since completing initial training, Cardman has supported the real-time station operations and lunar surface exploration planning. So she's used to working and studying in environments that are harsh and isolating.
Now, the pilot for CREW-11 is NASA astronaut Mike Fink. This is Fink's fourth trip to the space station, having logged 382 days in space and 9 spacewalks during Expedition 9 in 2004, Expedition 18 in 2008, and STS-134 in 2011, the final flight of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Throughout the past decade, Fink has applied his expertise to NASA's Commercial Crew program, advancing the development and testing of Dragon and Boeing's Starliner spacecraft towards operational certification. The Emsworth, Pennsylvania native is a graduate of the United States Air Force Test Pilot School and holds a bachelor's degree from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge, in both aeronautics and astronautics, as well as Earth, atmospheric, and planetary sciences. He also has a master's degree in aeronautics and astronautics from Stanford University in California. Fink is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel with more than 2,000 flight hours in over 30 different aircraft.
And it is a special trip, this CREW-11, for Mike Fink, just because of what he's been able to accomplish with Space Shuttle Endeavour, the final mission there, and then moving on over to Dragon Endeavour for today's flight. Well, now moving on to Kimi Yui with 142 days in space. This mission is his second trip to the International Space Station after his selection as a JAXA astronaut, in 2009. Yui flew as a flight engineer for Expedition 44 and then Expedition 45 and became the first Japanese astronaut to capture JAXA's H-2 transfer vehicle using the station's robotic arm. In addition to constructing a new experimental environment aboard Kibo, the Japanese experiment module, he conducted a total of 21 experiments for JAXA. In November 2016, Yui was assigned as the chief of the JAXA astronaut group.
And last but not least is mission specialist and Roscosmonaut Oleg Platonov. This mission is his first spaceflight. Before his selection as a cosmonaut in 2018, Platonov earned a degree in engineering from Krasnodar Air Force Academy in aircraft operations and air traffic management. Assigned a test cosmonaut in 2021, he has experience in piloting aircraft, zero-gravity training, scuba diving, and wilderness survival.
So now we continue to follow along with the path of CREW-11 as they recently completed the approach initiation burn, and everything went swimmingly for that burn. Everything nominal. The crew suited and seated, ready to continue their process. Now the next milestone is going to be waypoint 0, which we still have a little ways away. The crew about 4.7 kilometers away. Waypoint 0, that's the 400-meter mark for Dragon. So still some time, but anticipation continuing to build up as, again, the crew both aboard Dragon Endeavour and aboard the International Space Station, anxious to have hugs and handshakes here in the next little while.
Yeah, we showed that graphic earlier with all those very close maneuvers as the Dragon spacecraft approaches the International Space Station. Every single one of these maneuvers is very slight and steady. But what I think is really cool is like we're getting 400 meters away from the space station, but they're both moving at about 17,500 miles per hour. But speed is relative, so when you see them next to each other, it doesn't look that fast. They are flying very quickly.
And I've heard a lot of astronauts in this process, they say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So as methodical as it can be for the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft to make and inch its way, what we see on the screen, you're absolutely right. And to see them moving as quickly as they do, a lot can happen in a short amount of time. Well, we know that everybody is suited and seated, and again, we're continuing to track along as the Dragon spacecraft now 4.4 kilometers away from the International Space Station and continuing to close in on a range of about 4.2 meters per second. Well, they're continuing to track each other. Last time we checked in with where the International Space Station was, it was crossing over the Pacific Ocean, heading towards the east coast of the more southern region of South America. So as they continue that cat and mouse game of trying to find each other along the way, let's take a look at that crew that you have here on the ground supporting today's mission. Now, that's a great live shot of where we are here in Hawthorne, California, and that's where all the positions actively monitoring all the systems on the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft. And we also have all the teams that are in NASA's Johnson Space Center doing likewise from the International Space Station perspective.
We have this crew in mission control right now, Hawthorne, monitoring the crew all the way as it gets to the International Space Station, and then we'll transfer over to Houston, monitoring the crew while they're on the station. So there is that overlap period where both teams need to be working in tandem with each other, and graphic showing the thrusters on Dragon, which I think is really cool. It's a live graphic of every thruster that is thrusting, essentially. And I think it's so cool because, they're firing at different moments. There's a lot of tweaking that needs to happen. So there's several different thrusters firing at all different times to make sure that Dragon is oriented exactly the way that it needs to make its way as it approaches closer and closer to the International Space Station.
And Jesse, just to the right of that graphic you're seeing is those thrusters continuing to fire. And again, this is the maneuver, that mid-course burn that they're attempting and pushing Dragon to continue to properly align itself on the right trajectory to the International Space Station. But that's the international docking adapter that'll come into play a little bit later on. We've talked about the hooks needing to drive and hook to, after the soft capture, create the hard mate and bring Dragon even closer to the International Space Station before the leak checks can occur, the hatch opening, the pressurization, and so forth. So some great views on that screen. And again, as the spacecraft continuing to make its way closer and closer to the International Space Station, now about 1.5 kilometers away and closing in at a good rate as well of about 2 meters per second, as both Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station now covering over the southernmost portions of Africa.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, mid-course maneuver complete, performance nominal. Trajectory has converged on waypoint 0.
Dragon copies. Great news.
Great news indeed. That mid-course maneuver burn is complete. That was where we were seeing all those thrusters firing. Again, an adjustment needed as the vehicle approaches the International Space Station. There are very particular planned burns, and sometimes we add in additional potential burns that are only used if needed, and we did use this mid-course burn for this coasting phase for the CREW-11 crew. And you could see on your left-hand screen, well, there was a map of where Dragon and the International Space Station were located around the globe, but this is a great view of from the International Space Station, looking at Dragon, as you can see, way to waypoint 1, which will swing it up and above the International Space Station.
And those views,
really
again,
cool
coming
views.
from the orbiting laboratory, but and absolutely stellar. And that's the Cronus position inside of NASA's Johnson Space Center and Mission Control, providing these great views that allow us to follow along with Dragon's trajectory and procedures. But going back to a successful mid-course maneuver and helping out with that AI burn too, Jesse, that's just one of several opportunities where you can fine-tune and have those gates, those checkpoints, because now we're tracking what will be soon the next big milestone, reaching waypoint 0, that 400-meter mark, before Dragon will continue its approach, and they can hold at that waypoint 0. But if everything is aligned properly, sometimes we've seen the Dragon spacecraft continue to move forward. The crews on the ground both agree that everything looks great and we can continue to push forward, but just that's why we have those gates, to make sure that everything is properly aligned before we get any closer.
And also on the bottom left hand of your screen, you could see a couple dials there. We have the range and the rate. The range is the distance from the International Space Station, and the rate is how quickly it's moving towards the International Space Station. So again, live range and rate there that you can follow along as Dragon makes its way to the International Space Station.
So 1.2 kilometers away is all that separates the two vehicles right now. And on the left-hand side, again, those over-the-shoulder shots of Mike Fink and Zena Carbon looking over those trajectory. And there's Dragon looking up at the International Space Station, and there's the space station looking down at Dragon Endeavour. Now, again, they're going to be performing all these different gates that we've been talking about. Waypoint 0 is the next one, where they're going to reach the 400-meter mark from there, waypoint 1 and waypoint 2. Now, part of that will also have them go up and over top of the International Space Station, because again, they're going to catch up to the space station from below, swing out in front, and then over to the zenith port, or the space-facing side of the International Space Station, to docking. So still quite a bit of movement left for the spacecraft to accomplish.
Again, as we've been mentioning, the crew is in their seats. The commander and pilot are both monitoring using those displays that are right in front of them. Again, just monitoring. Dragon is an autonomous vehicle, so essentially on autopilot as they make their way to station. And I love this view of the International Space Station. You know, you see pictures and sometimes models of the International Space Station, but when you get to see it live, like a live view like this, it is so cool to know that that is flying above the Earth at all times, and you get to see it a little bit up close. Even though we're down here on Earth, we get to see it live on these views.
Especially as we get closer, all the hardware up close from the solar arrays you can see fanned out on either side. As we now just got word that there's going to be a go, no-go poll for whether or not the Dragon spacecraft can proceed past waypoint 0, or if they need to hold at that given point. So that's where everything will continue to be monitored from the teams on the ground, as well as the teams inside the International Space Station and the Dragon spacecraft. The big loop, you've heard it when they call up, they say Dragon on the big loop. That's what they mean, the communications that everyone is a part of, whether it's here in Hawthorne, in Houston, on the International Space Station, or inside Dragon Endeavour. And they've also just crossed the 1,000-kilometer mark, or 1,000-meter mark, 1 kilometer, if you will, and that brings them into the approach ellipsoid. So that's how close we are, and those milestones we're starting to reach for the spacecraft. So now approaching about 920 meters away, and there's that rate of closure, that 4.9 meters per second for Dragon Endeavour, is Zena Carbon and Mike Fink continuing to look over their screens and see the trajectory. And you can see it a little bit on that middle screen there, where the orb kind of on that top portion, that's where the International Space Station is. And you can see some of those lines, those pathways being drawn. That's where the Dragon spacecraft is looking to maneuver. You can see it even swing up and over to the left and kind of curve up and over top. So it's fun to see what the astronauts are seeing as they continue their procedure and stair-stepping to the orbiting laboratory.
And there you can see, this is a graphic of what Joseph was just mentioning. When they reach that waypoint 0 point on the graphic, again, the vehicle will move towards waypoint 1, which will swing up and over the International Space Station. This graphic is showing the Dragon spacecraft when it's below the station, moving from Earth towards the station. It's going to swing up and around, and again, on the space-facing side of the International Space Station, there's a better view of that. So it's going to take that path up to waypoint 1 and then begin to approach, first align itself with the docking adapter that arrow is pointing to at waypoint 2, and then that where it says contact is where that IDA or International docking adapter is, and that's where Dragon is going to dock and have its home for the next few months for CREW-11.
And we're still tracking that docking time, that soft capture time, at around about 11:26 p.m. Pacific, 2:26 a.m. Eastern time. And of course, as we continue to make our way towards the next milestone, that is waypoint 0 that we're talking about, we're going to get word of that go, no-go poll for the teams on the ground and how they wish for the spacecraft to continue to proceed. And there you get another great look again as coming down from the International Space Station, looking at the Dragon spacecraft. And you see that strobe light blinking, especially when you're in an orbital nighttime. It's helpful because that helps bring a shine of light literally on the International Space Station to help fine-tune some of those trajectory adjustments if necessary.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for approach 0. Burn is enabled. Maneuver start time, 5:35 Zulu. As a reminder, Dragon will nominally continue approach through waypoint 1 toward waypoint 2 without stopping at waypoint 1.
Dragon copies. We see the approach leg enabled flag is true. This will initiate at 0535 Zulu. Dragon will not stop at waypoint 1.
Communications there between the ground and the crew aboard Dragon Endeavour and NASA SpaceX CREW-11, and the confirmation from Commander Zena Cardman on that go, no-go poll for waypoint 0. As they continue to close in, that waypoint will be reached at the 400-meter mark, so still a little ways to go. Bottom left-hand side, you can see how close they are, 700 and now 8 meters away from the International Space Station. Well, this crew is going to be on board, Jesse, as you mentioned, for a good several months, and they're going to be participating in a lot of technology demonstrations, outreach activities, but also a lot of human research and performance. And one of the science experiments and research activations that they're going to dive into is right interwoven with the Artemis campaign, and that is simulated lunar landings that they'll be participating in microgravity, because again, that's the International Space Station, a unique perspective to accomplish a lot of these research. And select crew members will participate in this series of simulated moon landings before, during, and after their flight. And they're going to use handheld controllers to help over multiple screens, and they will fly through simulated scenarios created to resemble the lunar South Pole region that the Artemis crews plan to visit. And this experience will allow researchers to evaluate how different gravitational forces may disorient astronauts and affect their ability to pilot a spacecraft like a lunar lander. So that's a great way of using the International Space Station and that unique microgravity environment to advance NASA and the world's objectives of moving and returning to the moon and beyond.
Yeah, that is such an exciting mission to look forward to. It's been so long since we've been to the moon, and it's so exciting to know that even though we haven't been to the moon in years, we have been working towards going back to the moon and staying longer on the moon, which I think is going to be great. And this is why we do a lot of this research that's happening, like Joseph said, on the International Space Station.
So now 630 meters away. Now, inside of that is the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft continues its climb to catch up to the International Space Station. And that's just one of many research items, Jesse, that the crew will be participating in. Another one is learning more about the spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, or we call it SANS for short. And that study will investigate fluid pressure on the brain while they examine how the body processes B vitamins and whether supplements can help astronauts respond to bodily fluid shifts. Because in microgravity, like here on Earth, you have the gravity kind of keeping your body fluids in check and everything able to cycle appropriately. But in microgravity, that can shift, and participating crew members will test whether a daily B vitamin supplement can eliminate or ease symptoms of that SANS. And specific crew members will also wear thigh cuffs to help keep bodily fluids from traveling to the head. So it'll be interesting to see what results come of that, because again, all this being able to accomplish in that unique microgravity environment of the International Space Station to benefit future long-duration missions.
Yeah, and you know, some of these research experiments that are happening in space sometimes end up coming up with new ideas and new information that actually help us here on Earth. There's a lot of things that have come out of the research that NASA's done on the International Space Station that helps us with our daily lives here.
Now inside 570 meters away for NASA SpaceX CREW-11, as we have a transfer in communications there, and that's what was providing the live views from the International Space Station as they switch from different signals, different satellites to provide that data and the video feeds, again, coming from the Cronus team down at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. But there's the team here in Hawthorne that continues to monitor the pathways for the Dragon spacecraft and Endeavour, and everything continuing to move along path as we get closer and closer to waypoint 0. And again, still tracking that docking time. That'll be coming up a little bit later on here this evening on the West Coast, early morning on the East Coast, as Crew-11 anxious to get to the International Space Station.
Yeah, we're just under an hour away from that docking time. Still have a few maneuvers to do before they dock with the International Space Station. But it's a nice, smooth journey for them so far. Again, launching this morning, and just about 15 hours on their coasting to the International Space Station so far. Just about 1 hour left.
And that's what you're seeing right there in the bottom of your screen there, the T+. That's 13 hours, 45 minutes, and now 40 some odd seconds since they launched earlier this morning at 11:43 a.m. Eastern time, as we're now getting those views back as they were able to reconnect all the communications there. There's the Dragon spacecraft looking at a wonderful rendition and wonderful resolution of the International Space Station right there. And you can even see a Dragon spacecraft that is for Crew 10 right there on the topmost portion of the International Space Station. And that is the Dragon Endurance that took Crew 10 back to the orbiting lab back in March.
Yeah, again, I love this view. Just for perspective, the International Space Station is about the size of a football field. So with that in mind, you can kind of see how far Dragon is from the International Space Station so far. But as it gets closer, you can see how large the International Space Station really is.
We're about 5 minutes away from reaching waypoint 0 as we're closing in about 100 meters in terms of distance until we reach that 400-meter mark, and that's where waypoint 0 is to begin the first of what is going to be 3 gates or 3 checkpoints for the Dragon spacecraft to reach: waypoint 0, waypoint 1, and waypoint 2.
Again, this view is Dragon looking up at the International Space Station, still below the space station, but again, as it swings to waypoint 1, it's going to swing up and over the International
under its belt.
Yeah, the flight leader of the 5 Dragon spacecraft that we have in operation, carrying crew to and from the International Space Station out into space. Just pretty incredible how far reusability has come with spacecraft. The fact that we are on the 6th flight of Dragon is mind-blowing to me.
And we heard from the management teams of all the different programs, Commercial Crew Program, the NASA management, the International Space Station. But SpaceX had their management team on the post-launch press conference today, and they mentioned that this Dragon Endeavour holds the longest duration for a single mission. That was Crew 8, 235 days. And now, when they launched, they were at 700 days, right on the button, cumulative time for Dragon Endeavour. They anticipate that to possibly hit 4 digits at the time of mission completion. So again, an impressive run for this particular spacecraft, carrying NASA astronaut and commander of Crew-11, Zena Cardman, along with pilot and NASA astronaut Mike Fink. And then you have JAXA astronaut Kimiya Yui and Oleg Platonov of Roscosmos, the crew of 4, again, making its way slowly but surely to the International Space Station.
Yeah, Joseph, you hit a lot of milestones that Endeavour has been accomplishing. And again, reusability for SpaceX is key. It's basically our whole mission. This is how you bring the cost of space down, and being able to fly over and over again using the same vehicle is just incredible. And to be a part of these missions and watch this happen in real life is so cool.
And we mentioned earlier in the broadcast that there are crew aboard the International Space Station that are helping, currently activating and helping out with the docking procedures for today, and that's namely NASA astronaut Johnny Kim and NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. For Kim, he is located in the cupola, the window to the world. You've seen a lot of phenomenal imagery coming from now nearly 25 years of the International Space Station and continuous human presence from those great views. Well, he's using special equipment to monitor Dragon's approach to the International Space Station. And then Nicole Ayers will be on tap to help out with the hatch opening procedure. She did likewise for the Axiom Mission 4 team, so she has that experience to go as ready to welcome in even 2 of her own from NASA, and again, JAXA and Roscosmos astronaut and cosmonaut in tow as well. So again, it'll be a full day. I know this crew on board the Dragon, as well as the crew on the station, will be happy to see each other. They'll wind things down, but then they'll also begin handover procedures, which are going to get underway. About 3 days worth of full handover procedures, starting what I imagine be right tomorrow. They'll get familiarized with the station, go over safety protocols, and ultimately get themselves settled in and situated, because on the horizon will be the return of Crew 10.
And if you look in your right bottom corner, again, you can see a graphic of the Dragon spacecraft with the locations of its thrusters. And you can see the thrusters are firing one at a time. Again, it's moving from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1, and it's flying autonomously, so the thrusters are firing exactly what it needs to continue to adjust to make its way to that waypoint 1 location. I think that's so cool that you could see that live there. We don't always get views of the Dragon spacecraft where you can see the thruster. Sometimes we do, but this graphic allows you to see it in real time, which is awesome.
And we're about 26 minutes away from reaching that waypoint 1 mark, and about 15 minutes away from the next go, no-go poll. Again, these are all part of the systems and safety checkouts to make sure that Dragon is performing as it should. The International Space Station is ready to receive the spacecraft as well, as you continue to see those great views and those solar arrays reflecting the sunlight perfectly as the spacecraft continuing to move. And you see some slight adjustments in thruster firings happening in that bottom right-hand side when they illuminate from the black to white. That's helping illustrate, again, some of those fine tunings that need to happen for a spacecraft to properly align itself up with its ultimate destination. So to recap what we've been seeing so far here this evening, and what has been now just inside of the 14-hour mark of today's flight, earlier this morning, CREW-11, NASA SpaceX CREW-11, would launch from the Kennedy Space Center off the Florida coast at 11:43 a.m. Eastern time, and begin what was about a 16-hour journey, and still counting down to about 2 more hours or so to, if they might match up. Now, they did get a little bit ahead of schedule, but ultimately a shorter time period than their first launch attempt, which would have had them on about a 39-hour phasing, but ultimately a busy day from launch to the anticipated docking time, which we're still tracking to be around 11:26 p.m. Pacific, 2:26 a.m. Eastern time. And as we mentioned earlier, we're a few more minutes away from the waypoint 1 milestone, which will be 220 meters away, is all that separates the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. And again, we're going to hear another round of go, no-go polls as the crew on board. You can see again Mike Fink on the right-hand side, Zena Carbon, she is on the left, working through their screens. And again, as you mentioned, Jesse, autonomously Dragon, the ability to dock, but if they do need to take over manual control, they can do so, but certainly following along with every step of their procedures.
This is also a cool view. And of course, we lost the view right when I wanted to point out the spacesuits and the difference between Commander Zena's spacesuit and Mike Fink's spacesuit. When the view comes back, I'll try and point it out, but you could see the differences in the suits and the gloves and the cuffs on the arms. And there you could see those suits. You could see the difference right there just visually from Commander Zena's suit versus Mike Fink on the right. Mike Fink.
SpaceX Dragon to ground. Quick temperature request.
Go ahead, Dragon. With you on Dragon to ground.
Yes, sorry to ask at such a fun moment, but could we have it a little bit cooler in our cabin, please?
We
and again, really cool views. You could see Dragon getting clearer and clearer and closer to the International Space Station in this view. Again, we've got the dark background. That means that there's space behind Dragon, so it's moving from that waypoint 0, which was between Earth and the International Space Station. Now it's probably closer to being right next to the space station. And in your bottom left-hand corner, you can see the range or the distance from the space station, which is 381 meters from the space station. There's a better view to see a little bit more what that distance looks like as the Dragon spacecraft gets closer and closer to the station.
As these two continue to track down each other, they are currently flying over the North Pacific right now, some 250 plus statute miles above the Earth. And in the bottom left there, you can see the distance of Dragon from the International Space Station, now 372 meters away, and have slowed down to now a 1 meter per second rate closure as the thrusters firing in that bottom right-hand side of your screen. Again, that fine-tuning necessary to properly align Dragon to be in the exact right space at the right time as we close in on waypoint 1.
And with this view, you can tell that Dragon is basically next to the International Space Station, which means that it's about halfway to that waypoint 1 point.
And again, these two vehicles are flying incredibly fast, 17,500 miles an hour. So when you see it in this perspective relative to each other, it looks like it's that slow and steady pace.
Looks like they're not moving.
But again, they're moving so quickly that an orbital daytime and orbital nighttime comes and goes very quickly, so much so about 90 minutes for each. So that's impressive to know how fast they have to move, but also how quickly they have to move to close in on each other to ultimately bring CREW-11 to its destination, the International Space Station, for the next several months.
Yeah, if you really like sunrises and sunsets, being an astronaut is a great job to have because you get about 15, 16 of those every single day.
And that's something that I know Zena Cardman has talked a lot about, is getting spectacular views of photos, and that's a wonderful view from Dragon to the International Space Station. And there you can see that backside of Space Station in shadow as the sun just off to that left-hand side of Earth.
That is such a cool view.
As the Dragon spacecraft now making its way up over top of the International Space Station. That gives you great perspective of where they're heading. That space-facing port, that zenith port of the Harmony modules. So you had them when we originally started, they were just underneath the International Space Station. Then they swung up to be right about in line to where the Crew-10 Dragon is, that forward port. Well, now they have a little bit more ways to go. And there's a great illustration in the middle of that screen there, that Dragon where the line kind of swooshes around the circle. That's the Dragon spacecraft, and it needs to get to the top of that circle representing the International Space Station before it can properly align itself to the docking access and get ready to close in for those final few moments before docking itself. But this gives a great illustration of that flying up and over top maneuver that Endeavour is currently experiencing.
Yeah, I literally love this view. This is so awesome to see the International Space Station with Earth in the background. Again, Dragon is going to be moving to above the space station, so we'll eventually see, this is a view from Dragon, so we'll eventually see a view from Dragon looking at the space station with Earth like all behind the space station. That's how you know that Dragon will be above the space station.
And they again are currently flying over the Pacific Ocean. They're just about to pass over Hawaii at the moment, as Crew-11 continuing that methodical approach, now 314 meters away from the International Space Station, closing in at about 1.1 meters per second. View on the left there is the over-the-shoulder look of Commander Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, and on the right is the view from the space station to the Dragon. And again, there's the International Space Station from Dragon on the left. And on that left-hand side, you can see the great solar arrays of the International Space Station, but you can also see the IROSAs, the rollout solar arrays on that left-hand side to help enhance the power of the International Space Station, collecting that sunlight, converting it into energy for the crew on board to fly the orbiting laboratory.
And Dragon also does have solar arrays attached to the Dragon trunk. It's just on half of the trunk, but similar. While Dragon is in space and while it's docked to the International Space Station, that's how the Dragon spacecraft will be powered for its duration of its mission until it comes back down for splashdown.
Now 209 94 meters away. The milestone we're looking to get to is 220. That is waypoint 1. And we just received note that that's going to be about 6 minutes away as Dragon Endeavour and CREW-11 continue its approach to the International Space Station, tracking approximately 2:26 a.m. Eastern Time, 11:26 p.m. Pacific Time, for what has been a full day for the crew, launching earlier this morning at 11:43 a.m. Eastern from Launch Complex 39A in NASA's Kennedy Space Center, and then would execute a sequence of burns after a nominal orbit insertion and great performances from Stage 1 and Stage 2 of the Falcon 9. And then would begin that stair step with those burns, the phase burn, boost burn, close burn, transfer burn, and then the final co-elliptic burn to get them into the position they're in now. And then the approach initiation burn is what started our broadcast today to begin that journey towards the space station. And now hitting those milestones, waypoint 0 has come and gone. And now we're approaching waypoint 1, which again will be 220 meters that separates Dragon from the space station. There they'll join Expedition 73 and then switch over to Expedition 74 in the fall when the Soyuz crew rotation is completed, and then I'll see NASA astronaut Johnny Kim return to Earth, and NASA astronaut Chris Williams will begin his first flight, and he will make his way toward the orbiting laboratory, and that's what will transfer from Expedition 73 to Expedition 74. And currently on board and monitoring Johnny Kim, again in the cupola using the special tools to monitor Dragon's approach, Nicole Ayers will be tapped with responsibilities for hatch opening procedures. Ayers, member of Crew 10, alongside with Anne McLean of NASA, Takuya Onishi and Kirill Peskov of JAXA and Roscosmos, respectively. And for Johnny Kim and his Soyuz MS-27 crewmates, Sergei Ryzhikov and Alexei Zubritsky of Roscosmos, that crew of 7, soon to be a crew of 11, with CREW-11 approaching. Now closing in on 3 minutes until CREW-11 reaches waypoint 1, and you can start to see the sun setting a little bit. And we talked about the orbital daytime, orbital nighttime, and that's where we're going to lean on that strobe in the middle of the Dragon spacecraft to help identify where the craft is in relationship to the International Space Station. And of course, you see the port side and starboard side red and green lights to help illustrate their direction as well.
And CREW-11 currently approaching the International Space Station. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the range or the distance of the Dragon spacecraft from the International Space Station. We're at about 238 meters from the station. Waypoint 1 is about 220 meters away from the station. So we are getting pretty close to that waypoint 1.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue approach to waypoint 2.
Copies. Ring extension beginning shortly. We're expecting to continue through waypoint 1 onward to waypoint 2.
And as you heard those comms, we do have these checkpoints, waypoint 0, waypoint 1, waypoint 2. You heard those comms. Basically, a go, no-go poll was performed, and the Dragon spacecraft will actually pass through waypoint 1 and just begin to waypoint 2. So great news, smooth ride, no need to stop and hold. As they mentioned, they'll just move forward to that. Once they pass through waypoint 1, they'll just move forward to waypoint 2, which is at about 20 meters away from the International Space Station. And during that movement, they also will be aligning the Dragon spacecraft with the docking adapter during that movement as well.
And that's what I was just looking at my notes real quickly, is that is going to align itself with the docking access, and it's great to hear that they can move past waypoint 1 and move to 20 meters away, waypoint 2, as we have now reached an orbital nighttime, and that's where we'll lean on those strobe lights, the strobe lights and the starboard and port side lights of the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft to help us identify where it is in space in relationship to the International Space Station. Now a little more than 14 hours and 26 minutes into the journey of Crew-11.
Yeah, again, the spacecraft is now above the International Space Station on the space side, so it's looking from the International Space Station to Dragon. You just see space in the background.
And the team's on the ground continuing to monitor the trajectory. We should be crossing waypoint 1 here in just a matter of moments. Again, having them 220 meters away. You notice before we lost the data there at the bottom left-hand side, that rate of closure slowing down to now less than a meter per second. And as it gets closer and closer to the space station, it'll get even slower, almost a glacial rate of how glaciers move across.
Station Houston on the big loop for Johnny.
Station on the big loop here.
Monitor approach per step 3 of 1.102, Dragon approach and retreat monitoring. Let us know when your review is complete and you are ready for docking.
Station monitoring per step 3, the procedure review is complete and station crew ready for docking.
And that was NASA astronaut Johnny Kim talking to the teams in Houston.
And Houston copies. At waypoint 2, Dragon will briefly pause to align for docking, then automatically resume approach.
Station copy.
So NASA astronaut Johnny Kim communicating with the teams on the ground of the docking procedures. The soft capture ring has also been activated from the International Space Station side, ready to receive Dragon Endeavour and Crew-11. And just a moment ago, you saw some great thruster firings of the spacecraft in the blackness of space to see thrusters continuing to fire to push Dragon in even closer at 0.3 meters per second. Now about to be 5 meters away. And we'll wait for that contact.
2 meters, crew is hands off.
2 meters.
There was that call out for chop. Crew hands
1
off.
meter.
1 meter. Dragon contact and soft capture complete.
Dragon copy.
And there's the call. NASA SpaceX Crew-11 has arrived to the International Space Station with docking at 2:27 a.m. Eastern Time, 264 miles over the Southeast Pacific Ocean.
You can also see in the bottom right-hand corner the graphic furthest to the right showing the docking adapter previously said.
Ring retraction in progress.
Copies.
That graphic previously said soft capture. Now it says hard capture, so it's following along with all the action with the docking adapter. And we did hear that call out. We heard the capture ring. We are going to also have a sequence of 12 hooks, 6 at a time, that are going to lock in to that docking adapter, and then the umbilicals will then attach after that. So we should hear those call outs here shortly as well.
And if you're just joining us, NASA SpaceX Crew-11 has reached contact with the International Space Station, docking at 2:27 a.m. Eastern Time. They were 264 miles over the Southeast Pacific Ocean. And you heard the soft capture retract, now looking to form that hard mate, as you mentioned, Jesse, all part of those docking procedures. And once the hooks drive, then you can start making your way into the pressurization and hatch opening procedures and being able to follow along. But again, it'll be some time before they do all the leak checks and system checks needed to begin that procedure. But again, great to see that NASA SpaceX Crew-11 has come home to the International Space Station.
It's home for the next few months.
Crew-11 has made initial contact now and is situating itself in with those hooks driving to form the hard mate on the space-facing port of the International Space Station's Harmony module. And that soft capture system has retracted to bring the spacecraft even closer to form that hard capture. And you mentioned, Jesse, earlier that those 12 hooks, the 2 sets of 6, to firmly hold Dragon in place. That process will take about 15 minutes or so. So again, it just recently docked to the International Space Station about 2 minutes ago. So it'll take some time, and we also want to have that relative motion dampen out a little bit because, again, Dragon coming in very slowly, but still want that relative motion to dampen out. So the docking procedures well underway, and it'll take about 15 minutes or so. And after all of the docking events are successful, flight controllers will configure the Dragon spacecraft for docked operations and connect the power and data to the spacecraft. The Crew-11 crew will be able to get out of their spacesuits and set them up to dry and begin operations to get the hatches open and join the Expedition 73 crew on board the International Space Station. That includes pressurizing the vestibule and a round of leak checks, and we expect, again, to take it about 2 hours or so before the hatches open, and we'll continue to monitor along with that time frame. But again, they have docked at 2:27 a.m. Eastern Time as the space station and the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft orbiting over the Southeast Pacific Ocean. All of this will be followed by a welcoming ceremony before the crew goes into a safety briefing with the team already on board, Crew 10.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Dragon copy is full with you.
And great to hear that communications to the ring retraction being completed. And
UE and Roscosmonaut Oleg Platon.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, docking sequence complete. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to DOF suits per procedure 4.012 and begin post-docking cabin configuration per 4.400 in parallel.
Tracking copies all. We are activating 4.012 and 4.400.
Great news. They're proceeding with moving forward with getting the crew on the International Space Station. And as I was mentioning, the Crew-11 crew with Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, all 4 of the crew will be floating into the International Space Station shortly, which is very exciting. But just a little recap of how they got here. They suited up. They took a short ride to Launch Complex 39A, where they ingressed the vehicle, the Dragon vehicle, on top of a Falcon 9 rocket. They lifted off from Kennedy Space Center Launch Complex 39A at 8:43 a.m. Pacific Time, or 11:43 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday, August 1st. Stage 1 came back, separated from the second stage, and Dragon came back and landed on Landing Zone 1, and the crew continued on their journey all day today. They've had a long phasing burn making their way to the International Space Station. They've had 5 major burns on Dragon, and then finally docked with the International Space Station at 11:27 p.m. Pacific time on Friday, August 1st, or 2:27 a.m. Eastern time on August 2nd.
It's definitely been a full day for CREW-11, that's for sure, from launch to capture. And now that CREW-11 has arrived, we're looking ahead to the return of Crew-10. We'll be taking you along as they return home after their long-duration stay aboard the International Space Stations. Now, teams are assessing return dates, and they have announced during media breakouts that it will be no earlier than August 6th. But again, we'll continue to follow along, and it will be announced on NASA.gov, so be sure to tune in as NASA and SpaceX bring you that live coverage every step of their journey home. You can also follow us on X at SpaceX and NASA on social media for real-time updates. And again, thank you for watching. Go NASA, go SpaceX, and go Crew-11, and go Crew-10. For those of you watching on X, please head on over to NASA Plus and follow the coverage live for the welcome remarks, the hatch opening, and more.
And thank you, all of you, for joining us and being with us here in Hawthorne today. And thank you, Joseph, for being here with us today in Hawthorne, California. Thanks to everybody for tuning in.
It's been wonderful to work with you. And now we're going to toss it over to Sam Jones at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston to continue sharing the mission as the crew prepares to board their home for the next few months, the International Space Station. Thank you.
Good morning again from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We just wrapped up our joint coverage with SpaceX of Crew-11's arrival to the International Space Station.
Kimmy, I've got you loud and clear on the cabin mic on the big loop.
You're also loud and clear. Thank you.
Stand by for hardline audio config.
And Dragon copy, standing by.
And a view back inside the International Space Station. Again, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers is going to be prime for the responsibility of the hatch opening procedures today. You can see that zenith hatch there on your screen. The white circular portion that's a little deeper into the hatchway, and that pathway is called the pressurized mating adapter. It's the white hatch right there around it. That is called the APAS hatch, or the androgynous peripheral attach system. The international docking adapter, which is on the other side of the hatch, just
Car 0 DPDT.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop for suit fan follow-up.
Ready to copy.
We took a closer look on the ground, and we do see that the suit fans are still running and have nominal telemetry. We did see that the waist fan turned off around the time of your call. Could that have been what you heard?
That is possible.
So we're tracking about 19 minutes into the suit drying period now.
Yeah, affirm. Our timer is about 20 minutes.
And this view of NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers as she works to open up the APAS hatch following the vestibule repressurization and leak checks, everything looking good.
On the big group, inventory report.
Kimia, I'm with you on the big loop for the inventory report. Ready to copy.
Okay, first, water. 203, 1 remaining. 204, 4 remaining.
I copied 203, 1 remaining, 204, 4 remaining.
That's a good copy, and that's including the flashing this room. And next for the food, 302, 2 remaining. 304, 3 remaining.
Once this portion of the procedures is complete, the crew inside of the Dragon will then work to open up the hatch on their side. Following this, the IMV ducting that you saw, some of that orange and white hose-looking hardware will work to be further installed as well.
Station and SpaceX. Station on 2. Station is ready for Dragon hatch equalization.
And with the hatches open, it will be just another moment before the crew does float aboard the International Space Station. They have some important closeout duties, including working through procedures with some lithium hydroxide canisters. Those are consumable carbon dioxide scrubbers used inside of Dragon, so they do want to conserve those carbon dioxide scrubbers.
Dragon Houston on the big loop. When you get to step 6.3, you are go.
And Dragon copies Houston. We are ready for 6.3. We're opening location 23 at this time.
Once the crew does float on board the International Space Station, we are targeting a welcome ceremony this morning at 4:15 a.m. Central. Again, if you're just joining us, CREW-11 docked to the International Space Station's Zenith port of the Harmony module at 1:27 a.m. Central Time. Now coming through the hatch is Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov. This is his very first visit to the International Space Station. Some big hugs there with NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers and Johnny Kim. And continuing to get a warm welcome aboard the International Space Station for him, again, first-time flyer. And next through the hatch is JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kimi Yu. And now we have NASA astronaut Mike Fink for his fourth time to the International Space Station. And now coming into view is Zena Cardman. Again, her first time on board the International Space Station as well. Lots of smiles and hugs. "11 humans on board the International Space Station now. We are targeting a welcome ceremony this morning at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, rather. If you're just joining us, CREW-11 has just floated through the hatch of their Dragon spacecraft onto the International Space Station following their docking at 1:27 a.m. Central Time this morning. They did launch yesterday at 10:43 a.m. Central from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. With CREW-11's arrival to the International Space Station, the population on board is now 11 and will remain 11 crew members for a short time as CREW-10 and CREW-11 complete a brief handover period before CREW-10 undocks and splashes down off the coast of California. Again, we are awaiting a welcome ceremony this morning to begin at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, just about 45 minutes from now, following the arrival of CREW-11 to the International Space Station at 1:27 a.m. Central. CREW-11 launched from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida yesterday at 10:43 a.m. Also on your screen is the current commander of the International Space Station, Takuya Onishi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. There are currently 2 JAXA astronauts on board Space Station following Kimi Ayui's arrival at 1:27 a.m. Central Time. Yui arrived on board CREW-11 with NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, following their launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida yesterday, August 1st at 10:43 a.m. Central.
And standby 1, Johnny. And Johnny, that was a good voice check. We'll sync up with you guys for the event at 9:15. And actually, Johnny, if you're offering up, we'll take the backup voice check as well on the other camera. Sorry to make you float away. Yeah, and Johnny, we're not hearing you come down on that one. And Johnny, we don't need to troubleshoot. We like the primary, so no worries there. Copy, thumbs up.
And with a good scene and voice check, we are looking ahead towards today's welcoming ceremony to begin at 4:15 a.m. Central Time this morning.
Station Houston on 2 for cupola shutters.
On 2.
Hey, so we're getting close to a cupola temp constraint, which will require us to close the shutters. The last thing you'd want to do is interrupt you guys during the PAO event to do so. So we're going to ask you to go ahead and close those shutters. And we definitely apologize to our new crewmates who are probably looking out at the views right now, but we'll make it up to you guys on the back end.
Copy, and they are currently closed.
Copy all. Thank you.
And we did just hear some communications there about the cupola shutters. The cupola is the portion of the International Space Station that is lovingly known as the window to the world. Essentially, it's an area that crew members are able to look outside the window and take amazing photography of our home planet. They do have a set of protective shutters outside of the windows of the cupola that can be open and closed for protective reasons, and so that call up to the crew to go ahead and preemptively close those cupola shutters was what that communications was about. And we are now 20 minutes out from the start of today's welcome ceremony at 4:15 a.m. Central Time. If you are just joining us, you are looking at a live view inside the International Space Station ahead of that welcoming ceremony. We did have CREW-11 that docked to the International Space Station Zenith port of the International Space Station's Harmony module at 1:27 a.m. Central Time this morning. Following that, hatches were opened at 2:46 a.m. Central Time. All of this following their launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida the day prior at 10:43 a.m. Central. So soon we will have that welcome ceremony where all 11 crew members on board the International Space Station will get to participate in this event, officially welcoming CREW-11 of NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, as well as JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, Kimi Yui, as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov on board the International Space Station. For some statistics for you, this is Cardman's very first space flight as well as Platonov's. It's the 4th space flight for NASA astronaut Mike Fink and the 2nd for Kimi Yui. And we are now 15 minutes out from today's welcome ceremony, beginning at 3:15 a.m. Central Time. And as we await today's welcome ceremony starting in a few minutes at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, you're looking at a live view inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where the team did work through procedures today for not only the docking, but the vestibule repressurization and then eventually hatch opening. The team on console during today's shift was led by Ronak Dave, the flight director on console during docking this morning. And the team here in the room did help to get on board NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, as well as JAXA astronaut Kimi Yui and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov following their docking at 1:27 a.m. Central Time. The quartet of CREW-11 did launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida yesterday, August 1st at 10:43 a.m. Central. And you're looking at a view there of the Endeavour spacecraft docked to the zenith port of the International Space Station's Harmony module. To the lower left of the Endeavour spacecraft is another Dragon that will actually be returning Crew-10 back to Earth in the coming days. Crew-10 is going to work on a handover with Crew-11 that of course just arrived again this morning at 1:27 a.m. Central Time. Following that handover period, Crew-10 will undock and splash down off the coast of California, and this will actually be the very first time that humans splash down off the coast of California as part of NASA's Commercial Crew program. Just a few weeks ago, Axiom 4 did splash down off the coast of California as part of NASA's a private astronaut mission aboard the International Space Station. So again, we're just about 10 minutes out from this morning's welcome event, beginning at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, where all 11 crew members currently on board the space station will join and participate. And you're getting a live look inside the International Space Station as NASA astronaut Mike Fink, now on his 4th trip to space station, does a little microgravity flying. We are targeting our welcome ceremony to begin here in just a few minutes at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, so we'll start to see all 11 crew members come into frame. On the left there is NASA astronaut Ann McClain. And on the right is the current space station commander of JAXA, Tokoya Onishi. And now joining in the frame is JAXA astronaut Kimi Yui. This is Yui's 2nd trip to the International Space Station. And we will go ahead and stand by for just a couple minutes longer ahead of the welcome ceremony today at 4:15 a.m. Central Time. If you're just joining us, CREW-11 docked to the International Space Station's Zenith port of the Harmony module at 1:27 a.m. Central Time this morning. At 2:46 a.m. Central, hatches were opened. All of this following their launch on August 1st at 10:43 a.m. Central from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is Station. We are ready for welcome remarks.
Please begin the welcome ceremony.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody on the ground from the International Space Station. And Endeavour crew, welcome on board. Yokoso, Daburo Pajalabach. And we are so happy and excited to see your smiling faces. And Gina, Oleg, congratulations on your first space flight. We are looking forward to hearing your impressions and your feelings about that. And Mike and Kimia, welcome back. Your experience will be an invaluable asset for Expedition 73. And we have a very busy handover period ahead of us, but I'm really looking forward to working with each of you. So now I will pass the microphone to CREW-11 Commander Gina Cardman.
You can tell I'm new. Hello. This has been the absolute journey of a lifetime. We are so incredibly grateful to be here. Thank you so much for this warm welcome. It was such an unbelievably beautiful sight to see the space station come into our view for the first time, especially with these wonderful crewmates. Oleg and I, both for the first time, and of course Mike and Kimia-san have so much experience that they bring to this team. With deep gratitude to everyone who got us ready for this moment. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Zena, and thank you to the Expedition 73 crew. You have made us feel so welcome. We're so glad to be here. We're happy to join you, and we will do our best to help the 73 crew who's on Crew 10 to get home safely. Your friends and family are waiting for you. In the meantime, this is a beautiful space station, and it's so good to be back, and we're here to take good care of it and help do our very best.
Oh, thank you very much for warm, full, very, very good welcome. And I'm so grateful to be here. We have great CREW-11 crew members and also this expedition members. Yeah, I'm very looking forward to working with them and make this Expedition 73 the best. I'll work hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimia-san. I'm Oleg Platonov, and I'm also would like to say thank you very much for so warm meeting, and I believe and I hope we will have incredible and unbelievable time on board. И спасибо моим коллегам, будущим соэкипажникам. Я также благодарю вас за такую теплую встречу. И спасибо всем на Земле, кто готовил меня и наш экипаж и сделал все возможное, чтобы отправить нас сюда. Мы обещаем выполнить все наши задачи на самые высокие оценки и продвигать человечество в области космонавтики только вперед. Спасибо.
Ура. С энтузиазмом.
Thank you, guys, and once again, welcome on board the International Space Station. And Houston, back with you. That concludes our event.
Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications. Station Houston, back with you on 2 for big picture, rest of the day.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, Talk, we were thinking of hopping right into the ISS safety briefing, and then for the rest of the day, we're going to try to move everything to the left. And then for the rest of the day, we're going to try to move everything to the left as much as possible. Blue activities somewhat in the same order chronologically, just to make sure that we're all in sync. How copy?
Okay, copy all. Basically, we move everything to the left except for pink activity and also non-CREW-11 related PMC.
That is a good readback. Ready when you are.
And we are going to just start a safety briefing so you guys can send a test command for caution warning tones.
Okay, sounds like a plan. We will give you a call when we're ready to send those.
Copy that.
And there you had it, a very warm welcome to CREW-11 on board the International Space Station following their launch August 1st at 10:43 a.m. Central Time. They docked today at 1:27 a.m. Central to the zenith port of the International Space Station. Following that, hatches were opened at 2:46 a.m. and we just wrapped up an incredible welcome ceremony where CREW-11 is now safely on board. You can follow along with the mission on social media and by checking the daily Space Station blog, but that's going to do it for us. Thanks so much for following along on CREW-11's journey. Go NASA, go SpaceX, go CREW-11. This is Mission Control Houston.